Hello and welcome to R&R's Ask the Expert. I'm Kayla McGowan, Editor-in-Chief, and today we are joined by two industry experts, but also two amazing people as a whole. We're going to discuss their book, The Road to Seven Figures, Your Guide to Home Service Success. If you haven't guessed, it's Eric Sprague and Katie Harris. They are my special guests today. So a little bit about both of them. Eric has over 25 years in home service and in the home service industry, a wealth of experience and knowledge, and has run a successful business in cleaning and restoration, but he's also served as a VP of operations. Now, as the owner and director of education at SuperTech University, he focuses on training technicians and managers in soft skills across home service verticals, excuse me. Eric is also the author of this book, as I mentioned before, and if you don't see him teaching or educating, he's probably on the slopes or maybe biking. Next is Katie. She's an amazing human being. She not only is the co-founder of Spot On Solutions, which is a digital marketing agency based out of Idaho. She is a Google Premier partner, and her team helps home service companies grow through innovative strategies. And this is beyond marketing. Don't let that fool you. She is also an investor in a custom cabinetry shop and a sought-after trainer. She is the co-author of this amazing book, and outside of what she does on a day-to-day, she also is a certified John Maxwell leadership coach and trainer, as well as a DISC behavior consultant. If you don't know what that is, you should take a DISC assessment, by the way. And she also is a member of the Forbes Agency Council and volunteers as a court-appointed special advocate, also known as CASA. Outside of all of these amazing things, she is a wife, a mother, and a proud grandmother. Please welcome Eric and Katie.
Wow, that's something, huh,
Yeah.
Eric?
Katie,
Thank you.
I'm so impressed with your bio. It's
Don't be
amazing.
impressed. Don't be impressed. It's I don't know. When you put things on paper, you're like, dang,
I
I
did
think
I
I must
just
be old, right?
I
I guess
didn't
I'm old. So,
that sounds me.
So welcome. Thank you guys for joining me and taking the time to discuss, quite frankly, this amazing book that I urge people to really take the time to read and learn some things about not just yourself, but the industry and how to strive for success. So before we get into the great details of this amazing book, what urged you guys to put a piece like this together?
Boy, you take it, Eric, because you started
Yeah.
it. It was
Okay.
your baby.
Yeah. You know, Kayla, in the intro, you said I've been doing this for 25 years, but it's actually like owning businesses for 25 years. I've worked in home services since I was 15 years old. So I'm going to age myself. That's 43 years in this space. And, you know, I saw how many people never get where they want to go, and they're good people and they're smart people and they work so hard, but they get stuck because they didn't have like these certain skills or they didn't put the roadmap together, right, to hit each thing. And look, why do I know that? Because I made all those mistakes and I paid all the money to figure that out with my business partner, Larry, who's also my college roommate. And I was just like, I was with a person that Katie and I are both friends with, Brett Gill, and he was on our podcast, and he said, only 5% of all businesses in the United States ever reach seven figures in a year. And like, I had that wrenching gut feeling, Kayla, like, oh my gosh, that's unbelievable. And then I started thinking of all the people that I know, and I'm like, your life could be so much better if you just had this like kind of roadmap to go by, and you can't just outwork it, right? Like there's a point where you can only work so much or so hard. So I was like, all right, I want to write a book and like put together all 43 years and try to help. If it could help one person reach seven figures who wouldn't have otherwise, it's worth the time and energy to me. I think Katie probably feels the same way, but Katie.
Yeah, for sure. I was just really lucky because Eric started talking to me about some ideas he had for a book, and we started, bouncing some ideas off of each other. And I feel super blessed that he asked me to come in and help write part of it. So that's how it kind of came to be. And then we just started putting some words to paper. My heart is honestly like I started in journalism. And so I transitioned to digital, about 13 years ago and really just fell in love with digital marketing. But my heart still got a little bit of little bit of journalism in it somewhere.
So, Kayla, the part I didn't tell Katie when I asked her to write, the sections of the book on marketing. So, just so for full disclosure, Katie was my marketer the whole time we had our restoration company, and then also for SuperTech. So, who else am I going to go to, right? And what I didn't tell Katie, so I knew Katie had a journalism background. I didn't tell Katie I was like a straight D student and like the worst, like the worst ever, but I somehow pulled it together and I think I did fairly okay on this.
I don't think you told me that till after like the book was already at the publisher, like it was done,
Well,
and
I had
I
to
was
sell you
ready.
on being involved. I wasn't going to tell you up front.
So, yeah,
I
so
think
it
that's
was
so
fun.
interesting. And I think you guys actually probably not intentionally do something that's extremely important is collaboration, right? I think that's the other thing that this book really touches on. I think it also talks about there's pieces to the puzzle that come in at the right time. And so, I appreciate you guys talking about where it came about and how, right? I mean, the book is what it is because you both took the time to write it together. And I think that's one thing, if it doesn't teach us that collaboration is important, it teaches us the story of patience and leaning on people for their professional avenues. So it's interesting, D student, nothing wrong with that. You've been a successful business owner. So, hey, I think that's something else to highlight that this industry can really take advantage of. You don't have to be a scholar. You really don't. You have to have the drive, the will, the love for this industry, but most importantly, you have to be willing to learn. And I think that, sometimes people see dollars and that's where they kind of start with their road to failure, unfortunately. So with that being said, can you kind of talk about why you guys laid the book out the way you laid it out? So we talked about this before we started the podcast, and I just really appreciate the way you guys laid it out. So can you kind of dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's always the person who's the owner who is the roadblock to their own success a lot of the times, right? And like me, I think a lot of us are unemployable to other people, right? So we're that kind of, I'm going to do it my way. And I'm certainly that person. And it's like, I'll just work hard. I'll just work really hard, thinking that that's the answer, right? And it is the answer to a degree. I mean, I think Katie could vouch that I'm a hard worker still, but you know, you also have to have strategy to go with that. And the first thing that I learned, and I talked about it in the book, which was hard for me because I'm a pretty private person, generally speaking, was I had a heart attack at 49 because I had worked myself nearly to death. And that was the first time I recognized that the entrepreneur has to take care of themselves first. They are the product, right? You're the product. Well, and if the product's not being taken well care of, the product's never going to yield much of a return. And my whole thing, like literally every single day, I probably said for 30 years, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Right. I'll work 20 hours a day. I'll sleep 4. I'll see my family when I can because I want to create a better life for everybody.
Mhm.
And that's not the way to go about it, right? So really, to be honest, the first portion of the book is a cautionary tale to ever because lots of entrepreneurs think like I do, and
Yeah.
Katie thinks like I do to some degree, right? Is that you have to take care of yourself first. If you're good, the business will be better. So that was, and look, I'll be honest, that was like I had to rewrite that section like 5 times to get myself to say what my struggles were because that was hard for me.
And I've said this a lot of times, but if all you do is read that first section of the book, it's totally worth it because I think it's beautiful and raw and real, and true and relatable, all those things. And so Eric does a really good job of laying that out. And I think it really resonates with people. I really love Greg McGowan. He's the author of the book Essentialism. And in it, he says, protect the asset and you are the asset. And so when we get in, we get so busy taking care of everybody else and doing all the things that we have to do. The last person we generally take care of as business owners is ourselves. And so you have to protect the asset and just opening up the conversation to start talking about that. I think, I mean, Eric, you can speak to this, but we've been shocked, honestly, from the minute we put out some early copies of the book, we've been shocked at the response to it. And I think it's for that reason, because people are like, oh, I am the asset. What does that look like? How do I do better? And what does it look like to be able to sit in a space and it's okay to be kind of vulnerable about it. And it's okay to not be perfect, right? It's okay to not come across like I got everything figured out. It's been a really it's been an exciting journey since we released the book to see that outcome from it.
Yeah,
I
and I would
think for
really
that,
like this. Oh, sorry. I was
oh
just
no,
gonna say, I'd like
go
to
ahead.
say like what you guys did in the first part of the book is not just applied to you as a business owner, it's also a person. And I think that's if you're really looking in deep into the book, if you like to dissect things, right? And that's probably the marketer side of my brain, that there's always something underlying. There's some type of psychology in there, and you've got to really apply it not just to your business hat, but your life as a whole, because we also lead by example, not just in our business, but in our home, right? We're building the next generation of entrepreneurs. And so I think that's the other thing that I really took away from it too is yes, it's your mind and your body for your business and your staff, but we're also responsible for making this industry and other industries successful with our own children and grandchildren.
Yeah. I think also once you get in it, a lot of us forget why we started it in the first place. Like once you're in, you're just going, right? And now you're reacting, you become reactionary. And, when you start, I mean, I remember when I was getting ready to start the business, I have a house that like looks down over this mountain valley and everybody would be asleep. And I'd look down this valley and I'd be dreaming like what the shop will look like and what the vans will look like and what my day will look like. And then I started a business and none of those was nowhere near, what I want. And all of a sudden, like I'll be honest, the only reason I became an entrepreneur is because I wanted to bike and ski during the day while everybody worked on my behalf. That literally, and then in the first 10 years of my business or 8 years or whatever, I barely skied or biked. I just worked all the time, right? So I think we have to remind ourselves, why am I doing this? Who am I doing this for? And we get so wrapped up in the doing, we forget what the goal is. I've said this on a couple other podcasts as well, is I have very few regrets in life, like almost none. The one regret I have is I literally missed both of my kids growing up. Like I worked nonstop. In my head, it's like I'm doing it for them.
Mhm.
But there's a big part that's BS because I was doing it for my ego too, right? And all of a sudden they're grown and I'm trying to like play catch up since we sold that business to like before they get married and leave, I got to spend as much time with them as I could. And if I could go back and do it again, I never would have worked that much. Like I could have gone 5 more years to sell my business and actually be home more, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs probably feel that.
Right.
I agree 100%. I think you just touched on something kind of important there too, that there's significance to this book, maybe to yourself, right? Because looking back, if you would have had this resource in your hand, you could have had more time with your family too. And that's the goal of this, right? To be efficient, to build strategies, implement them, build a great staff, but not only that, have time for yourself too, and build a seven-figure business. And I think that's important too, because it is possible. I think a lot of times people don't think it's possible. And that's one thing is when a resource like this comes from industry professionals, it clicks, right? It's not some outside source telling you, even though there's great books about strategies and building a business, sometimes it just really hits home when it's someone in your space because they've lived that struggle, they've learned those lessons, so you don't have to essentially.
Yeah.
So if there's I don't dare say one thing that people can learn from this book, but maybe what are like the top three things that you would hope that readers take away from this? I think that kind of is the importance behind this drive for this piece too, right? There was an underlying goal for you guys to touch people, but like I said, dare I say one, two, three, or four, what do you hope that readers take away from this?
Yeah. I think one of the first things for me is when I look at like what my journey has looked like, I own a couple agencies. I'm in a very, very small town where It's like, how is that even possible, right? Like, oh, you're going to start a digital marketing agency in Blackfoot, Idaho. What does that look like? And we started Get Found First, and then we started Spot On Solutions. And I've had some other opportunities, but here's what I've learned is that the journey to seven figures and beyond, right? It's hard and it can feel really lonely, and you're going to bump into some plateaus all along the way. But there's actually a roadmap you can follow for it. And it was like, I think hitting your first million is the hardest, right? Go hit your first million and then keep doing the same things that got you there. You're going to still have challenges. I tell Eric this all the time. I'm like, the challenges are still there, and they're the exact same challenges all along the way as you grow. They just have more zeros at the end. They just have more people in the building, but the challenges are still there. And I think one of the things that has helped me the most is every time I hit one of those plateaus, I didn't intend to be a business owner. That wasn't my path. I was a journalist, and so I had to go learn. I had to go learn digital marketing. I had to go learn the restoration industry. I had to go learn home services, right? And all along the way, you learn different things, but I couldn't do that. I couldn't have done that on my own. Maybe I could have done it on my own, but it would take me a really, really, really long time. And it would have hurt a whole lot more than it did. And so I think being able to look at what other people do, like what does success look like and what can I learn from it? You don't have to learn everything on your own. And that's maybe one of the things I love the most about the book is because it's the formula wherever you're at in the business. If you're still trying to hit your first million, that is a great roadmap to go follow. If you're on your third, fourth, fifth, 10th million, it's still the same roadmap. It's just got more zeros and more people. So is that fair to say, Eric?
Oh, it's spot on, So as you were talking, I was writing down like my three or whatever. It's hard to pick three, right? Because, it's like, well, you have to have the marketing to get the phone to ring and you have to be able to sell it once you get it. Like there's all that stuff, right? But I think for me, it's the first part that we talked about. It's you. You have to get good first to be good for anybody else. Then you have to learn. This is really two parts, but I'm going to lump them together. You need to learn the CEO skills that it actually takes to run a business because most of us start as technicians. So we think like technicians, and all of a sudden, I'm a business owner, but I still think like a tech. I mean, that's great if you're a tech, but it doesn't work if you're an entrepreneur, right? So you have to actually learn all the executive function skills. And part of that is leadership. And that's where a lot of people fall short. They just are not natural leaders or they don't work on their leadership skills because, and here's like the main thing for me, and Katie talked about more zeros, more people. In our world, nobody gets to $1 million in revenue by themselves, right? I mean, maybe a software company could do that or something, or somebody made an app. Home services, no way. You're going to have people. And where most businesses start to stall is it depends on industry a little bit, but 500,000, 600,000, right? All of a sudden they just stall and they're there for like 20 years straight. Why? Because that owner can't let go. That owner can't build a team. They haven't worked on themselves to get the leadership skills and have the ability to trust others and build systems because you're not going to make it by yourself.
Yeah.
So if you have to make a decision at some point, am I going to be an owner operator and think like an owner operator? Or am I going to be a multi-truck, larger company? And what skills do I have to learn to do that?
And that's the secret right there is what do I have to learn to go do that? Like, I think that our culture right now of social media makes it look like everybody does it, right? Everybody gets up at 5 a.m. and everybody has the fancy car and everybody. That's not what life actually looks like.
No.
And so I think being really real that like it's a grind, but it can also be a really exhilarating, awesome, rewarding, fulfilling adventure that you get to go on when you have a roadmap for it a little bit. So
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you guys. I think if I had to break it down into three, it would definitely be one, like you just said, Eric, yourself, right? You can't be a successful leader, yet let alone a business owner, if you can't respect and perfect yourself, essentially. Though perfection is not really true, but get to the nearest point of perfection for yourself as possible. I would say like the second thing is definitely taking the time to understand and learn and implement is kind of, I know that's like three things, but I think they all go hand in hand. And then the third is once you've done all those steps, you can actually build a team, right? And I think that's the beauty of all of this because so many people come into this industry and they think if you're, able-minded, able-body, you're going to be okay. But that's not necessarily the case. Yes, you can be great at that with as a technician, but to own your own business, let alone see 1 million, 2 million or more, there's a whole strategy in place. And I think you guys both hit a really good point that this book, even though it says 7 figures, it could actually be 9 figures or whatever the case may be, right? Like you guys said, this is designed to help you no matter where you are in the process of building your legacy or your business. And this is the exception of one size fits all because honestly, you tailor it to where you are in your business. And I think when people hit that 1 million or even 500,000, that side of building your team and still focusing on within is sometimes lost. And that's why it's that 20-year plateau, like you said, and I think that's extremely important. So we talked about plateau and success, but what are some of the most common challenges? I think you mentioned one was, owner operator mentality, which you have to take the operator portion out. But what are some other ones that you guys see that it's very common? I think marketing is one huge piece to this puzzle, like you said, social media. But I also think people not taking the time to understand or maybe use the correct resources. We're taught to run a business, you should, hire your own team, but sometimes you need to hire an agency, right? So can you guys talk about some of those challenges?
You want to talk about the time that my team fired me from being the person who hires?
I think,
Yeah.
and I think that's a
Right. So
reality.
this is the perfect example, right? So on a disc, I'm a high D, right? I just want to go. I want to do stuff. And I just felt that, oh, I'm the person who hires here. And, Katie's marketing's working and our phone's ringing and I need more vans and more people quickly. And I would just, anybody that could fog a mirror and had a pulse, get in a van and go. Right. And then, as you know, all the fallout from that. Right. But I don't have that fallout. I'm sitting at my desk and now my managers and the other technicians and the admin team. So finally, they did an intervention and said, hey, you're not good at this. Right. Like you are ruining our lives in this company. And, I had to take my medicine. I had grown good managers. I'm proud of that. And then they're like, we are going to build a system so that we can hire good people, the type of people that will probably be successful. And it's not going to be easy to get a job here. And all of a sudden, everything changed in our company, right? That was a pivotal moment for us to take me out of something that I was not wired to do. Many owners would hold on to that like it was in a death grip, like, no, it's my company. I'm going to do the hiring. So you have to build a team that's willing to do the right thing. And sometimes that means stand up to you.
Yeah. One of the most pivotal times in my company, Eric's heard me talk about this a lot, but my team started to grow really fast. And I'm like, here I am, I'm bumping up on something I've never done before, right? I'm like, oh, I've never managed a team of 10 people, 20 people, 50 people. And you hit that all along the way because it looks different. But as my team started to grow, I was like, what is going on? Like everything I say like sets people off. And I was so weird. I was like, they don't like me very much. I don't think I like them very much. Like this is not what I want to do. And I have a really good friend, Justin Sifford with Wylander. And I was like, I don't know what's going on. Right. My team is growing, sales are good, like business is good, but we are making each other crazy. And he asked me, he's like, well, what's your personality style? And I'm like, I don't know. And that was really my first introduction to DISC and understanding what that looks like. That transformed my company when we were right at the $1 million mark. So this is a lot of years ago, but we were just hitting right on that. I shouldn't say hitting, we were like banging our head into that $1 million mark. And our team was starting to really grow. A lot of good things were happening when he told us this. And so we did it. We got our personality assessments done. We did it for our team. Well, guess what? There's like 3 people in our company that had really outgoing DI, if you're familiar with it, personality styles, and they were the owners of the company. And then you had the entire rest of our team who had SC personality styles. And I, to this day, feel super blessed that we unintentionally, like, totally went and hired people that were great at the things we sucked at. Like, that was such a huge lift for my company that we did that. But we didn't understand how to talk to each other. And as soon as we figured that out and disc became personalities became a part of the conversation in our culture, everything changed. Everything changed. And that, to me, I mean, that was probably 7 years ago that we really landed on that. And to this day, you come work at Get Found First or Spot On Solutions, and in the first couple of days of being here, you're having trainings on disc because it's just, I think it's mission critical to having a company that knows how to communicate. And for me personally, it started with me. I can't control how anybody else communicates, right? But I can definitely be aware of how I communicate and how that comes across. That was pivotal, huge pivotal moment for our company.
Yeah. The same for us, Kayla. What Larry and I realized as we were going through this journey of like not being technicians anymore and starting to become leaders and real owners, at least my definition of that, was, I grew up playing sports and, culture, the C word, so many people don't like, I mean, was critical. I remember being on teams where on paper we should win every single game, but then you look at us and we can't get along because everybody thinks they're the superstar and it's nothing but strife in the locker room, right? Which translates to the field. And I've also been on teams where you had a couple stars and a lot of role players and it was scrappy and we won every game, right? So I was looking at our team and I'm like, we have to create a success academy inside the walls of our company, right? If I do nothing else here. So there was a point where I had been growing managers. I don't know how many million we were at, but we probably had about 30 people at this time. And I was like, I need to step away from operations and put all of my energy into our culture and our training. That is my new job. I'm like chief of the Success Academy or whatever. And it changed everything for us. We didn't have all the problems anymore. We were really having a daily meeting every single day. I remember we were at a conference talking about our culture, and there was another restorer from somewhere else in the country. And he said, hey, I'm going to be in California in a month. Can I swing by and see? Because my culture's not good, which was all him, but that's a whole different story. And he came and he was watching our morning meeting and everybody like high fiving and hugging and like the whole deal, right? Which was to us at this by now normal.
Yeah.
And when they all left, Larry and I were standing in the warehouse and he came up and he looked right in our eyes, like with all seriousness. And he said, you guys run a cult. And I was like offended, right? I'm like, what are you talking about? And he goes, you guys all use this language that like nobody would know. Like everybody's just talking this stuff. And what he's talking about was disc. Because in the meeting, our guys would be like, okay, Kayla, you're going to go see Mrs. Smith today. Well, Katie had been at Mrs. Smith's a year ago and says, hey, Mrs. Smith's a high D. You got to like get in there, get out, and all of a sudden, that's what every meeting looked like for us. It's a tool. Like disc is a tool to communicate.
Yeah, I was definitely going to say it's not just used to assess yourself. It also is a way to help you become a great leader, right? Because now you know where they sit on this scale essentially and how people take things. I mean, it's just I did it with one of my teams and I thought it was so amazing because you have a thought in your mind, but then when you see the results, you're like, I really didn't see you like that. I didn't think you were that type of person. And I think it's important for building culture, and you can't have a strong team without building culture. And if that's your core and everybody appreciates it and it works for everybody, they're able to take that out to your customers. And then you build loyal and returning customers because you're treating them not like people, not like numbers. And I think that's kind of where I see disc assessment kind of in life in general. We're all consumers too, and how would you want to be treated? So if you take what you learn about yourself in that assessment, you're actually able to be not only a better person, but a better coworker, a better leader. Um, And I think that's interesting for somebody to come in and not understand what their problem is and then, see that you guys are excelling in something and then is like, this is not right. I don't understand what you're talking about, right? But it's take a moment to understand what we're talking about, I think is the other thing, instead of coming in with that like kind of that wall in front of you, like, I don't understand it, so it's not right. You know what I
Well,
mean?
I mean, Kayla, to that point, I think that's one of the secrets to success. And Eric, I think you'll agree with this. We talk about this a lot. Every time I hit something in my business that I don't know how to do, I've went and looked for coaches, and I could give you the names of a lot of people who I'm like, they taught me this, they taught me that, they helped me figure out this, right? I think that there's so many things to go learn and do. We're not going to be good at all of them. We're not even going to know what those look like. And so I can point to a lot of very specific people and be like, that's where I learned how to set my vision for my company. That's how I learned about this. That's how I learned about my P&L. That's how I learned how to do whatever it is. Every single piece of my company, when it gets too painful, and this is how I know when I've hit a roadblock, when I've hit a plateau of some sort, when it is just too painful, when every day feels hard, when every day I'm trying to figure out the same problem over and over and over, that's when I know I've ran into something that I don't know how to do and I better go learn it, right? And so to me that is a key to success is when something just hurts all the time and you're always trying to figure it out, and go find somebody who's been there that can show you that path.
I think the people who, in the end of the day, become successful are the ones that are most open to change too. Like they're most open to finding a coach. I mean, the amount of money that Larry and I have spent on coaching in the last 15 years would make most people probably ill. Makes me ill sometimes, but wouldn't be here if I didn't go get the coaching,
Yeah.
right? Larry and I still have coaches. We were just talking the other day about maybe even each getting an individual coach because we have such different roles, we have different needs. We've always done the coaching together, and like Katie still has a coach, right? You never end coaching. Like if you're really on a growth pattern, you're always getting coached. You should be anyway, I
Well,
think.
yeah, and I would say in this industry in particular, which a lot of industries, the importance of education, training, and betterment is a constant no matter where you sit in your role, or even frankly your career, right? I think that's the other thing. The moment, I say this a lot, probably a broken record, but the moment you feel like you know everything or you have nothing to learn is the time you should be walking away from the space that you're in. Because you're not doing only yourself a disservice, you're doing the people that you surround yourself with a disservice, because we should always be thinking that there's a way to improve ourselves, improve our business, and improve our team. And I think life coaches are huge. Counseling is huge. I mean, all of these things that there's a specialty for a particular person to bring in, that's what you should do, even with your team, right? I think this is also a great point
I
within.
wouldn't, I also wouldn't underestimate the value of just like industry events. We have fantastic industry events. You can go learn and connect at those. We have great industry publications. We have, to me, there were times there's no way I could have afforded a coach, right? A coach. Like I just, so you know what? I'm reading, I'm listening to podcasts, that stuff out there. There's so much opportunity. What we're filling our time with, right? We don't have to hire a coach to do some of the things we're talking about. There's just different ways that you can learn and grow and get better.
Yeah. I
100%.
remember when we first started, we started in January 2nd, 2008. So not a good time to start a business, right? And the phone's not ringing and Larry and I are freaking out like how are we going to keep this business going? And you know, I, back then for carpet cleaning, Joe Polish was the big marketer. Larry and I couldn't even afford his program. We bought like a used copy on eBay for like 15 bucks. And I remember we just sat in this room with a big whiteboard and just would listen and be writing out a plan. And I'm 100% with Katie. You start wherever you can start,
Yeah.
and then you'll work up as you get better and get more money coming in.
Yeah, I agree. I think the other important part to this success too is, we've talked about yourself, right? We've talked about using your resources. I think another piece that a lot of people in this space in other industries who are owners are the financial portion, right? Oh, I'll hire an accountant. I'll hire this. I'll hire that. But there at some point you're going to get reports. You're going to want to be involved. How important is that piece to this strategy of success?
Look, I mean, I can only speak for me. So we had so little experience in this, and we were starting to make some money, and Larry and I invested in a year's worth of coaching with Ellen Rohr. Anybody knows Ellen Rohr? She's like the queen of home service finance. She hadn't started Zoom Drain yet. It was very expensive. And Larry and I just sat there on her every week for an hour with Ellen, and she literally taught us every single thing we needed to know about the financial part. Like whatever amount of money that was in that year, I don't remember, but I blocked it out. But it set the tone for the rest of our career, right? Because we were in a known financial position at all times. Whereas like before Ellen, Larry and I would look and go, we're super busy. Are we making any money? I don't know. I'm tired. I'm working a lot, right? You have to understand your numbers. You need to job cost. You need to know what your ratios of your P&L should look like. And if you can't, those are, look, anybody can learn those skills. Like if I could learn those skills, like anybody can learn those skills. I mean, Katie, when you started your business, you didn't have finance
I
background
had no
either.
idea, how to do any of that stuff. And here's the problem. When you are an entrepreneur and you're in the space that you're in and you're growing and you don't know how to do something, that is a really scary place to be. And so what do we tend to do? We tend to ignore it, right? The things that we should be learning are the things that we like, oh, I don't want to go look at that. Like I'm embarrassed. I don't know how to do that. And it was scary for me to be like, I got to go learn how to read a P&L. I've got to go learn what the right percentage should be for this. It was a total terrifying, right? Insecure. Maybe that's really the best word for it. I was so insecure in my ability to do that, that the almost initial reaction is just don't do it. That's why so many people, when we start their marketing, we start asking them money questions. They have no idea, like no idea at all. And it's because when we're insecure in it, we ignore it until it becomes such a big problem and so much pain that we have to do something about it. And so for me, I had to go learn all that. And the really cool thing is it's not that hard to learn, right? There are smart people out there that'll teach it. It's not that hard to learn. And as soon as you start to understand it, the empowerment that comes from that, it fuels momentum in your business in other areas. When you get good a good grasp on things that have been hard, man, you're so encouraged to go do the next hard thing and then go do the next hard thing. And pretty soon you're putting systems in place in your business that really propel growth.
Yeah, I think that you guys touch on a couple of really crucial points, right? When we're talking about understanding finances, understanding like profit and loss, that's huge because, like you said, Eric, you could be busy as heck, but what if you have too much staff? Or what if you're using too many resources, right? I think that's the other thing is, are we making money? If you have to stop and ask yourself that question, it's telling you where your gap is, right? I also think, Katie, you touched on this too. It's like, oh, I'll do it tomorrow. Oh, I'll do it tomorrow. Oh, I'll do it
Yeah.
tomorrow. And then tomorrow becomes, oh, I need to do it right now and I need to learn and it's a fire, right? Um, and you touched on marketing, right? I think that's one of like the biggest things that people really struggle with because they don't understand the value in putting a specific budget into digital marketing or even print, honestly. I think a lot of people feel like just like that intimidated, right? Because they don't understand it. And that's why, professionals like yourself are so important because even if they weren't to use your service, they could still learn something from you, right? So, can you kind of talk about the role that digital marketing plays in the home service? I know sometimes it's a little scary for some people that don't know, and like what strategy you guys have found successful, right? I think it's strategies. It might be more than one. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, if you can kind of explain that.
So I talk in the book about we have different stages that we're at. And it's like, are you learning it? Are you doing it? Or is it time to let it go? And understanding where you're at with that, I think is important. It's like, I got to learn this. I feel like everybody has to learn some basic things to digital marketing in general, just so you know the right questions to ask. You know the things to keep your eyes on. You have to learn it. Then you have a choice to make. Am I going to do this myself? Am I going to do this internally? Am I going to let it go? And some people are like, I'm going to do the marketing because I like it. I'm good at it. This is what I want to do. And some people hang on to the marketing longer than they should, and they don't really have the skills for it or the talent for it. So I think it's important to just be really real and say, hey, am I learning it? Am I doing it? Or is it time to let it go? When people come to me, the very first thing I say, like, you got to go take a look at your website. I feel like the website is the foundation of everything else you're going to do with your marketing, right? You're going to be driving people somewhere, and that is to your website. And so that's the starter place. And then it becomes a question of, what are your goals? There's not a one size fits all approach to marketing. Some things just aren't right for some people. Some people don't have the budget for things. I'm really cautious right now. One of the things I would say in home services, primarily like water damage restoration, it's expensive to buy water damage leads. And so a lot of people will come in and they'll say, I've got $1,500 a month to spend on my PPC, all right, my Google ads. Okay, let's get started. I think you've got to be careful. You don't want to do a disservice to yourself, because if you're paying $1,500, but a lead costs $500 or $600, like, you're out of the auction so fast that you're burning money. And then you're like, I'm not getting enough leads for my money, so I'm not going to advertise, right? And so you'll just pull back, when a lot of times the approach is actually, you've just got to spend more to get what you want. It's not 1 + 1 = 2. Sometimes it's 1 + 1 = 5. But I caution people that come in and say, I'm going to start with a really low budget. And then they become very disillusioned with the results. And so you just have to understand your market and what that looks like. You've got to know what your goal is, right? If you're coming in and saying, I'm going to do Facebook marketing, and my goal is to get 20 leads a month. Well, you might become very disillusioned with that, because Facebook is a disruptive type of advertising, and maybe not where somebody's low in the funnel with an intent. So to me, it's all about, what are your goals and what does your market look like? And then you put together a plan that makes a lot of sense. And I'm not one to say don't spend money on pay-per-click. That's what we do, right? We run Google Guaranteed, local service ads, pay-per-click. But I'm also one to say you got to be really realistic about what the right budget is. Don't waste money on something that's not going to yield a return, but also don't limit what you can actually do by understanding what the potential is. So I could talk all day about marketing. Eric teases me because the more I talk about it, the more I geek out about it. And so I'll control it. But it is one of the scariest places for people to go, because Google changes so fast. And it is a full-time job to even just keep up and know what you should be doing. I think that marketing should not be looked at as an expense, right? And that is a lot of times where it is I can only afford to spend this much money on my marketing. All those decisions should be driven by the return. And as long as the return makes sense, I mean, if I walk up to an ATM and I put $1 in it and it gives me 100 back, I'm going to put as many dollars as I have into that ATM. And so you've just got to understand, like, what is the right plan to get the return. And the focus should really be on the return on the investment more than the cost of whatever it is you're doing. Cost becomes really easy when the value's there on the back end.
And I was going to say, that's one of your, marketing is also a key metric that you should be tracking, along with, what you're spending on supplies, what you're spending on manpower, because ultimately, if you do trust the process of marketing, it is a process, right? And I think that's the other thing that people don't understand, is they think it should be instantaneous. And also, quality is better than quantity. And I think a lot of times people think that, oh, I can throw money here and I'm going to get quantity. But in this space, it's about quality. And I think that's where, the importance of asking questions and understanding how far your dollar really does go makes a huge difference. And it also plays a role in your P&L. I think that's the other important thing for people to understand. Marketing's not in its space by itself. It's a crucial part of your business, to be quite honest.
Yeah. Well, to your point, I mean, the most common thing people say to me is, like, when we start talking about their marketing goals, like, I just want my phone to ring. Right? Like, it's super simple. Like, I just want my phone to ring. That's it. And that's halfway true. I'm like, you don't just want your phone to ring, you want your phone to ring with the right people.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so I think that it's really critical to understand your own goals when you're going into marketing. Also understand your audience. Who is it you want to go after? What does your ideal customer really look like, right? Who not all customers are created equal. Some calls come in and if you're not job costing, you're not making money. And some calls come in and you have huge profit margins in there, right? So know those things. You got to know that about yourself. You got to know that about your ideal customer. And then you got to track the results so you know what your return actually looks like.
Yeah, and I think this also builds into how you build your team out, right? If you can build your team a bigger team, a more robust team, because that's going to also everything has a domino effect, if you will, in this strategy. And I think that's why you guys laid the book out the way you guys did, because yourself understanding strategies, marketing, all of that leads you up to building a team, right? Building your culture. So what are some of the tips that you guys have, not only for hiring, but retaining staff? And I think this also goes into the opportunities that this book has brought of having people come in and actually train with you guys. So I'd like you guys to elaborate on some of that.
I think hiring or, acquisition of talent is a marketing function too, right? To be honest. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong. They're just like, oh, I finally need somebody, so I'll go throw an ad on Craigslist or whatever, you know, Indeed. And, you know, Larry and I were in Los Angeles. So, when everybody says, oh, nobody wants to work anymore, we were getting that 15 years ago, right? Like LA is greater LA. There's lots of opportunity. People can go lots of different places for work. So we were fighting for talent the whole time. And, just some of the things that we did is we're like, okay, what are we good at, right? The opposite side of the marketing. Like we're good at referral marketing, right? So we're hiring Katie to do the digital, and Larry and I and our team are out meeting plumbers and property managers. But along that route, we're going to like the local supply houses, right? They know who is not happy wherever they are, right? And we're just bugging their ear when we're bringing them a pizza. Hey, if you know anybody that's not happy where they are and they're good, give us a call or have them call us, right? We're going to the guidance counselors at the high school or the athletic directors. I like to hire athletes because they're coachable, they're used to hard work, right? I'm going to be all year long marketing to places and people like that to acquire talent, right? I'm going to build a great culture because we know from Know How's survey, 60%, I think it was 59% of all technicians that you get come from the technicians that you already have.
Mhm.
Well, I'm basically marketing my company to my own techs by creating an environment they like to work at. And then they sit at the bar on a Friday night and their buddy says, I hate the landscaping company I work at. And they go, well, you should call Eric and Larry. We like where we work. Right. So I think that's step number one is that number one, have to always be looking for talent and you have to systematize it. Katie, you have
No,
the same thing, right?
I echo all of that. One of the things that has been surprising to us, we renovated a building in downtown of this little teeny tiny town we work in. It was this building that sat vacant for like 8 years. It's 14,000 square foot building. And we were like, okay, we want this building to keep some of this old history that it has, but we also want to kind of Google it a little bit, right? We'd been to Google Chicago and Google Manhattan, and we're like, we want this Google element in our building. And so that's what we did. And what we didn't anticipate when we did it, because we thought we want it to be a place our team loves to be, and we built it with that in mind. But what I didn't anticipate is what a powerful recruiting tool, our hiring tool, that is for us. I mean, Eric, what's it like when you walk in the door?
Oh, it's amazing, right? You walk into Blackfoot and it's this little town in the plains of Idaho, and you walk in Katie's front door and you think you might be in Silicon Valley, right? Like it has that vibe. And I mean, I know if I'm looking around the greater Blackfoot area for a job and I walk into that building, all of a sudden that's already moving up to the top of my list of where I want to work.
We just didn't expect it in that way. And so all of a sudden we have people coming in for job interviews and they're like, "Oh man, I had no idea." Like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I thought you were a small agency." Right? Like there's it's the coolest thing. So we walk into interviews with people and they've already decided before we ask one single question, like, this is a place I want to work,
Yeah.
which is really cool. And so I would say, like, something to consider is you, I mean, never miss a chance to make a great first impression. That includes to the people you want to go recruit. You want to get the best people, you've got to find a way to wow them. And that doesn't mean a big fancy building. That doesn't mean, but whatever it is you're doing, Eric wowed them by sitting them in a room full of all their competition. So they're like, oh, dang, a lot of people want to work here, right? So find a way to wow them right off the bat. And then, like Eric said, have a team of cheerleaders that are going to go tell them, come work here with me. This is the best place to work. When somebody walks in here for an interview, my team is already like, oh, you're so lucky. You're here for a job interview. Like it's super cool when that starts to happen.
I think it also builds that, business family, right? I think that's the other thing. We spend most of our time away from our family working. And so if you don't enjoy it and you don't have the culture or the, bond of that, it makes it really hard. And I think you said it best right now, Katie, is you have to set an expectation and impress them. Just as you expect them to walk in the door wearing a certain attire, their hairs are in the right place. I think that it's both ways. It's not just, hey, this person has to meet our expectations. You as an employer have to meet expectations and oftentimes exceed them and keep it consistent and constant. So, I think that's important for everybody to understand too. It's not just about getting the bodies in the seats, it's about how you treat one another, but also making them stay. We know we have very high turnover, and that's industry wide. Doesn't matter where you go, it's all industries. I think we still see it. So I kind of wanted to touch on this little point. This your guys' book came out and you have received a ton of feedback, but one thing you guys weren't expecting was, an aspect of being more involved. So I'd like you guys to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it was cool. And honestly, I really attribute this to this first section of the book. That section where Eric shares his story is just, I think people are hungry for that type of connection. And they're like, that is what I want. I didn't know where to find that. We immediately, as we put out some kind of early author copies to this to get some feedback before we finalized it, people were like, hey, will you coach me? And can I come talk to you? And will you work one-on-one with me? And we're like, you know what? We're not doing that. We don't have the time for that. And I think we're both at a point in our career where it's like bigger than that. Like we want the impact to really make a difference. And there's only so many hours in our day. And so we just were like, kind of off the cuff, why don't you come out to Ogden to this group and we'll spend a couple days and go through it. And so we filled a whole room of people for a couple days in Ogden, Utah, in Eric's hometown. And it was like, we're gonna get really serious about you. We're gonna go through some of the points of the book. And then we're gonna do some deep work. We're actually gonna sit in this room and we're gonna do some things, honestly, that get to the heart of some of your problems. And it was, I mean, I really don't know any better way to say it than it was just kind of magical, right?
It was. Yeah, it was interesting, Kayla, because we were like, look, I have done a fair amount of one-to-one coaching over the last several years, and it's wonderful. And I've had companies that have really transformed them, but that's only one at a time. I can't hit enough people that way, right? It's like Katie said, I would like a bigger mission than that. And so, when we started to take the book and do the retreats, and we use the word retreat intentionally, right? Because what's a retreat? You go away to retreat because it's all about you, right? And look, a lot of times we will go to a big event and it's a rah-rah fest, and yes, you gain motivation, but you didn't get really much one-to-one content, right? It wasn't really about you. It was about the speaker talking at you, which, look, I do that. Katie does that. We do. I mean, that's part of our marketing push, right? But when they come to Utah, it's all about them. We sit in a room, and those 2 days are just all about you. And look, it blows me away, but literally every single time, at least one person, if not more, is crying on day one, right? And we're talking like old crusty contractors, you know, guys like me who just be like, yeah, I've been suffering in silence for years, right? I didn't know anybody felt like I did, right? Entrepreneurship can be a really lonely road. And what we're trying to do is build a community of people that are like-minded to kind of put their arms around that person and be like, you're not alone. We're all in this together. That's the goal.
Yeah, I think you guys have done an excellent job. And I think, we all probably share a lot of the same problems. And what better way to sit in a room for 2 days and talk about those problems and be vulnerable? I think that's the other important thing here is vulnerability, and the willing to learn and be better. So, thank you guys both for putting out this book. I think if those who are watching have not read it, need to stop this immediately and go read it themselves because, like I said, even if you read very little or it takes you a long time to read, you learn something, and that's the most important thing. And at the end of the day, you said it best. If you are able to help one person, you have met or exceeded your expectations as a professional in this space. And let's not forget, once you touch somebody, they go and spread your gospel for you too. So that's the beauty of this industry. And I'd like to thank you both so much for your time. And as always, until next time, we will see you on the next Ask the Expert. Take care.